Good evening and welcome to the public board meeting of May 27th, 2025. I would like to begin our meeting this evening by acknowledging that the schools in Campbell River and the school board offices are located on and the schools on Quadra Island are located on the traditional territory of the Little Nations, the Weewakai and Weewakam, and also acknowledge that School District 72 Campbell River encompasses a large geographical area. And I'd like to acknowledge also the Kalihus on Cortez, the Comox in Sayward, and the Homolko Nations as part of our learning communities. Please note that there is a short production delay between the live event that you are watching and the meeting participants. And the question and answer function is open online for questions on agenda items throughout this meeting. A final call for questions will be made after the last agenda item, and questions will be addressed at the end of the session. And on to chairperson's remarks. As we come together this evening, we find ourselves in the final stretch of the 2024-2025 school year. Across our schools, there is a familiar blend of excitement and exhaustion. Students are counting down the days to summer, and our staff are giving it everything they have to see learners across the finish line. This moment speaks volumes about the care, resilience, and deep commitment that fuels public education in our district. Tonight, we are here to consider the annual operating budget, a responsibility we take seriously because we know that these decisions impact classrooms, staff, families, and ultimately the experiences and success of our students. Let me briefly walk us through the process we'll be following this evening. In keeping with Robert's Rules of Order, the budget must go through 3 formal readings. For all 3 readings to take place during a single meeting tonight, we require unanimous consent from all trustees present. If that consent is given, we'll move through all 3 readings and proceed to a final vote, which requires a majority to pass. If unanimous consent is not achieved for 3 readings, the motion will be paused and brought back for consideration at our next scheduled meeting on June 17th. While this process may seem technical, it is an important part of how we ensure transparency, accountability, and responsible governance. And I want to remind everyone that under the School Act, we are legally required to submit a balanced budget to the Ministry of Education and Childcare by June 30th. As I've spent time with this year's budget, there's one area in particular that I've reflected on deeply, and it connects to a personal story. When I was a child, one of the adults who made a lasting impression on me wasn't a teacher, but my local public librarian, Miss Debbie. She wasn't just someone who loaned out books. She noticed what I was interested in. She challenged me with new ideas, encouraged my curiosity, and made me feel like my voice mattered. That simple act of being seen and supported ignited a love of reading that has shaped my entire life. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I chose to work in adult literacy later in my career. That's why I want to be very clear. While this budget includes structural changes that impact how teacher librarian roles function in our schools, it is not a reflection of diminished value. We fully recognize that teacher librarians bring specialized expertise to elementary literacy. Through carefully curated collections, high-interest books, and deeply honed skills in both traditional and digital literacy instruction, their work is essential. The changes proposed this year reflect a shift in structure, not in value. Teacher librarians who have historically co-taught alongside classroom teachers will now work in a more specialized capacity, leading literacy blocks independently and drawing on their professional strengths in new ways. No positions will be lost, but there will be reassignments, and we are committed to handling that transition with respect, care, and open communication. In the spirit of celebrating impact, I also want to share something that Trustee Gillis and I witnessed last week, an incredible student award ceremony at Robron School, our district's alternate learning school. Robron is not a traditional school. It is a relationship-driven, trauma-informed, flexible learning environment that meets students where they are. Students who, in many cases, have faced barriers that the traditional school system wasn't designed to accommodate. And yet, what we saw were students who are thriving. They're attending regularly, re-engaging with their education, and graduating with pride. Robron is proof that when we believe in students and build systems that support their individual needs, remarkable things can happen. This is exactly what our budget supports, not just the operational side of education, but the conditions that allow students to belong, to achieve, and to thrive. On that vein and off script, I just want to acknowledge that we have a room full of educational assistants in the room tonight, and that their role in children's education really matters. You are their people. You are the people that see them individually, and we appreciate the work that you do. All of this, Miss Debbie's quiet influence, the important work of teacher librarians, and the transformation happening at Robron needs to be viewed within the larger context we're facing. This year marks the beginning of a period of declining enrollment in our district. Without corresponding increases in core operating funding, the financial pressure will continue to grow. We are working hard to manage within our means, but I'll say it clearly, we cannot cut our way to excellence. That's why this board remains fully committed to transparency, ongoing consultation, and joint advocacy with our staff, our partners, and our community for the core funding that public education so urgently requires. So as we move into the formal part of tonight's meeting, I encourage us all to hold on to the stories and perspectives that ground this work. Let's remember the quiet influence of a librarian who helped a child feel seen, and how that spark of connection can change a life. Let's recognize the expertise and dedication of our teacher librarians who continue to light that spark for students every day. Let's carry the inspiration we witnessed at Robron, where students are not only re-engaging with school, but reclaiming their confidence and shaping new futures. And let's stay rooted in the reality we face, that this is a year of tough decisions, shaped by declining enrollment and flat funding. But it is also a year of deepened commitment to equity, to thoughtful change, and to advocating for the resources that our students and educators deserve. This budget reflects that tension, but also that promise. It asks us to move forward, not because the path is easy, but because the purpose is clear, to sustain and strengthen a public education system that meets every learner in every classroom where they are. Thank you. On to superintendent's remarks.
Thank you, Chair Eddie. Well, it's hard to believe that as we end the school year, we only have a month left in the school year, that another session is starting that I don't know if all trustees really know about or the gallery knows too much about, but we just started registration yesterday for summer school programs. And I think on the first day of registration, we had over 350.
300 in the first 3 minutes.
300 in the first 3 minutes register for summer school. So it's a very robust program that we're very proud of here in Campbell River. Registration is open until June 6th. We have session 1 that runs from July 7th to 18th, and it's a morning session from 8:30 to 12:30. Session 2 runs from July 21st to July 31st, and that's 8:30 to 12:55. And then we have high school sessions that run from July 7th to July 31st. And those are also 8:30 to 12:42. So morning programs that have very high attendance. I believe last year we had over 900 students attend the program, and it looks like we'll be well on our way to that this year. So for anybody who's watching or listening, if you haven't considered summer school, please do. There's some exciting opportunities there for our elementary students and some great opportunities for high school students wanting to finish up some programming. I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the great things that have happened in our school since our last board meeting. I had the pleasure to attend Southgate last Thursday to watch an unveiling of their wetland project. They have a wetland project that's really getting going now. I had Indigenous consultation, a project wild manager was there to help facilitate things. local teachers spearheaded a lot of that work. And it's been a project that's been on the go for a couple of years now, and we're hoping to really get it on the go next year. And this actually brings, in our school district, the total of wetland projects to 3. We now have 3 wetland projects. This one at Southgate, we have a very successful one at Quadra, and we have one on Cortez Island. So those projects continue to grow and provide awesome learning opportunities for students and staff alike. I was also able to attend a couple of Indigenous ceremonies last week. June, we know National Indigenous Day is June 21st, and June becomes the month in our schools where we have lots of Indigenous celebrations throughout the year, or throughout the month. But Cedar Elementary hosted a salmon festival last week. That was fantastic. And Georgia Park Elementary hosted an Indigenous Day that had several rotating stations and lots of incredible activities for students to participate in and students to learn from. So it was very exciting to go to those. And our high schools right now are having their award ceremonies. Timberline, in fact, is having their award ceremony right now as we are having this board meeting. So congratulations to all those students receiving awards this year at Timberline. And Carey High has their award ceremony on June 4th next week. So hoping to get to that. But just some of the great things as we wrap up the year, some exciting things to look forward to in summer school. And of course, we're all preparing for the budget that's going to run us into next year and help us have a successful year.
Thank you, Superintendent Manning. Moving forward to the motion for approval of the minutes from the May 13th meeting, that the minutes are hereby approved as circulated. Trustee Hagan, seconded by Trustee Gladish. All those in favor? Thank you. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, are there any additions or alterations to the agenda? Trustee McMahon?
Yes, in consideration of a conversation that was sparked at our last board meeting, and certainly in respect to the comments that you made tonight, I would like to put on the agenda a conversation around this table about how we might move forward with advocacy.
Okay, under 12D, elected and board matters.
Sure.
Any further additions or alterations to the agenda? Seeing none, the motion reads that the agenda is hereby approved as amended. May I have a mover? Trustee Gillis, seconded by Trustee Harper. All those in favor? Thank you. Report of the board decisions from the confidential meeting. Mr. Gillis.
We dealt with matters of teaching, administrative and support staff changes, property, legal and financial issues.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gillis. There is no correspondence in our agenda package, no further agenda or public submissions or education submissions. We're just flying through the agenda tonight. On to electorate and board matters, which is the 25-26 board meeting schedule. Secretary Treasurer Patrick.
Yes, we've got the schedule there for the next board year. Now we've tried to work around events, holidays. So generally our governance says to schedule every 3 weeks, but of course there's some where we're a little bit less than 3 weeks and some that are a little bit more, but there's the schedule for next year.
Awesome.
We're looking for a motion.
Oh, is there a motion? I don't have, so the motion reads that the draft Board of Education meeting schedule for 25-26 be adopted as presented. May I have a mover? Trustee Hagan, seconded by Trustee Briggs. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. All right. On to 12B, which is the Vancouver Island School Trustee Association Fall Conference.
Well, on behalf of Trustee Gladish and Trustee McMahon, who are critical to our organizational committee, we're planning to host all Vancouver Island trustees on the 3rd and 4th of October. And that's going to be an opportunity for us to explore, I think, one of the really important pathways in our strategic plan, and we're going to call it Pathways to Success. It's going to be looking at student-centered learning, and we're attempting to showcase some of the programs and some of the opportunities that exist currently within our district. We haven't yet confirmed with our speakers and our session facilitators or leaders, but we've got a dream team, and knowing the commitment of these educators, I'm sure that they will be very willing to be part of our program. It will be hosted at the Robron Center, providing we can get a booking. And something that we haven't done in past, it seems, for a number of the VISTA sessions that we've attended recently is have a meal together. You know, we recognize how important it is to sit around and have some chatter and to, again, get to know other people who are in similar positions to ours and get a pulse of our district. We'll also have at that dinner, we're hoping to have some featured speakers, some people that have been raised in our community, I think, as leaders, or they've emerged as major leaders within the community. And we're hoping to give them the opportunity to share with others the pathway that they took, some of the things that worked well for them in our education system, and maybe some of the things that we need to pay attention to in future. So we are pumped, we are ready. We do have, on the Saturday, we do have an entire session focused on advocacy, because I think it's dear to the hearts of all of our trustees on Vancouver Island. We know that we need to be a clear and, I think, unanimous or collaborative voice in terms of advocating for a lot of the funding needs that we feel are not being addressed within our districts and within our provinces. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Gillis. And I had an opportunity to meet with the VISTA executive for the first time on the weekend, so I have a bit of a better understanding of what it looks like. I don't know about everyone else, but I'm very proud of our community and our district, and I'm really excited to showcase it. I'm looking forward to people coming from the city to Campbell River, not to move, but to visit. On to 12C, which is the annual budget bylaw for fiscal year 25 and 26.
Drum roll.
Yeah. The big event is votes. So, I'm bringing our preliminary budget to you.
We don't speak to you, need help with it.
You might be able to send.
Mr. Becky's.
There we go.
Oh.
Okay, so we'll bring the preliminary budget for next year to the board for approval tonight. And we've at the last meeting, June. I think I might need some tech support here.
So we got it, that's for sure.
The mouse has a little key fob. Here's the little key center. Is there one on that side too?
This year.
No, my USB stick. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no specific sense. So.
So I'll just bring up the, let's bring up documents. So at the last meeting, I brought a list of proposals for us, and we knew that this was gonna be a tough year. And we, so between declining enrollment, increasing costs, and no increases in funding, we knew that we started this budget year with $1 million deficit. And it's been a tough full year. in September of last year, we missed our enrollment targets and had to reduce by $700,000 at that time. Whenever we have these types of reductions, we try to keep them away from positions. But this year, unfortunately, we knew that we were going to likely have to look at positions. So we changed our budget process a bit, and we tried reaching out to stakeholders a lot earlier. And what we did is we actually created a proposal list and started to get feedback. We've been looking at that feedback for about 2 months now. Based on the initial proposal list, we've been making modifications as we've gotten some feedback. So with that first round of feedback, we reduced or removed 1.5 positions that had been identified for reduction. Those were both were teaching positions. And we also reduced some of the proposal for the IT. So that's what we shared last meeting. Now, from last meeting to this meeting, we haven't received a lot of more feedback. Of course, at the board meeting, you saw the opposition to the proposal for the teacher librarians. And you also saw that there was a reference to school board office positions, and there was also a comment about, do we actually need all of the tech proposed investment? So we looked at that amongst the management team, and we made further refinements to that, to the proposals that we shared with you last week, or at last meeting. So I'll just point out where the changes are. So one of them is, we weren't able to remove or stop the proposal for the teacher librarians, but we did reduce it from 5 down to 4.4. So we've basically added some teacher librarian time to the schools that will help with some of the positions and with some of the staff that are in those positions. And what we ended up doing though is we have this position. It really fractured just has come in the last couple of days where we've got notification that we do have a teaching position at the school board office who will be resigning. And so through attrition, we will be able to identify that. Now, I can't say specifically what the title is because that person hasn't submitted a formal letter yet. So I don't want to preempt their announcement, but we are confident that we have a position there that we'll be able to reduce. So we've increased teacher librarian time, but we've unfortunately had to reduce another teaching position through attrition. And so that is the changes to the list. I don't know if I've ever had a change this late in the game with the proposals. It doesn't actually end up, we still are going to be submitting and asking the board to pass a balanced budget. Now, when you talk structural deficits, there's some one-time items on this that we can do this year, we can't do next year, that will still be structural in nature. That type of thing we will have to look at in the future. At the next meeting, I will bring a 3-year plan. If things don't change, we will be looking at reductions in future years as well. And so some of the things that you see up here are here for this year. They may not be next year. There may be something else next year and then something else the year after that. So again, we did take a look at alternatives to see based on the feedback that we heard, whether we can make any changes. But we feel at this point, we have to proceed with the proposals other than the 2 changes that I've just pointed out. So, that brings us to our actual budget. So surprisingly, our budget does keep growing. So the document in your agenda package is the preliminary budget, and it compares the preliminary next year to the preliminary this year. And as I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, last year, we missed our projections by a lot. We missed our projections by 70 students. Our planning for this year feels a whole lot better and we won't miss. But we missed it by 70 last year, and then we've declined by 15 from this year to next year is what we're projecting. So again, the enrollment challenges continue to face us. But so you can see the 2025 to the 2026, that reduction, because we missed it so much and we had to make reductions basically at the beginning of last year, a lot of these numbers, as you're comparing them, you really don't connect because we didn't operate based on those revenue numbers because we knew at that point that we weren't going to use them. So on this page, all I really wanted to do is point out the change in enrollment. Then on, and that first page is also consolidated. It's got the special purpose funds in it. It's got capital. And so really the proposals to balance the structural budget is based on the operating, which I will do. On statement 4, there is one item on here that I do want to point out. Right by my cursor, this deferred capital revenue goes from 1.64 to 8.2. Now that isn't actual revenue. That is something that we have to record on our capital side. And that identifies the setup of our childcare facilities. So those have finished. And because they finished this year, as we move into next year, we will be moving the grants that we receive for those are getting moved into something that we call deferred capital revenue. And that's that big swing. So it's not actual revenue that we're able to use to support operations. That's only on the capital side. You can see below, you've got amortization on the schedule as well. Then when we get into some of the revenues. So the big grants, administrative revenue grants. Now you can see that even with that enrollment reduction, that our provincial grants have gone up quite a bit. But that is due to how we recorded childcare. So last year we recorded childcare all under other revenue. And right here, you'll notice that other revenue dropped from 3.668 to 3.2. That's because we were asked, after we passed the budget, to move that into Ministry of Education and Childcare revenue. So we've moved it up. The other increase there is some of the labor grant that we got as well that didn't show up when we asked you to pass that last budget. It was probably about $700,000. So it's only covering costs. It's not an increase. So I mentioned the other revenue drop.
Just for clarification, the first schedule where the amount that was coming into the district was all lumped together, 93 million. Can you just explain for everybody what the special purpose funds look like? Like what that means, so that everyone has a really good understanding?
Sure. So we have probably, well, $75 million is of that 93 is operating. And so that is where the board has some discretion over, and I say some discretion because as funding doesn't keep up, the discretion keeps getting less and less and less. We have minimum class size, composition, and staffing ratios that must be met. So the board can't change those types of things. But there's a very small portion that is discretionary. When we get to special purpose funds, so special purpose funds are monies that dollars of annual program spending that are given to the district, but it's we're told exactly what it must be spent on. It can't be spent on anything else. So we've got things such as the Learning Improvement Fund, which must be spent on EAs, Strong Start, Community Links, classroom enhancement funding, Feeding Futures. We've got programs like that, and that adds up to about $10 million. But so it will support salaries, but if we don't, let's say we decided to make a reduction there instead of operating, the leftover funds would not be available to the board. So they would just sit there, or we would be asked to send them back to the ministry or the funding partner we found. So that's and it's growing. That's the only part that's really growing of the budget when it comes to just average funding.
To follow up on that, I'm not convinced that I have a firm grasp of the potential ramifications of using the 240K, which represents 25% of the savings from the classroom enhancement fund, vis-a-vis our situation with declining enrollment.
Mhm.
Like, could you elaborate a little bit? That's 25% of the savings of this budget, and I don't think I have a firm grasp of like what would happen if we've come up 50 kids short. How does using that classroom enhancement fund help us, hurt us? Is it a wash?
So generally with classroom enhancement funding, it is attached to a cost. So if you get the extra 50 kids and you have to add 2 positions, you add 2 positions, you get the funding. So that is, if you don't get those 2 positions, you don't get the funding, but then you don't need those positions.
Okay, well, I'm still not clear then on the line items 240.
Yeah.
That's savings. So is that assuming then that we're booking 240 savings on students that we're not going to have to service?
So right now, we have 2 positions within our teacher staffing structure that we feel if we apply for, we will receive the funding for that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh. But if we don't receive the funding,
If we don't receive the funding, then absolutely, we will be looking for additional 240,000.
that's okay. There you've answered my question. So it's subject to the ministry approving the request.
Yes, but again, it is an approach of looking for everything
No, I
we
get it.
can without
I get
trying to
But okay,
protect.
that was a ramification that I hadn't processed. Okay.
Okay, so on this next page, so this is the revenues where we got a little bit more. So you can see that increase in the top grant, that's all labor funding. So even though our enrollment declined by 70, that is labor funding that has increased. And again, the wages were contracted, were settled. There was something called an economic stability dividend that came after that the budget was passed, but they did provide funding to provide or to pay for that. So that gets rolled up into that top line item. You can see the childcare funding that switched over from other revenue, that 485. But you, of course, saw a loss somewhere else. Otherwise, things are, for the most part, stable. We do have to point out the investment income continues to decline. The nice thing with investment income is that's income in with no associated requirements. So it really offsets and subsidizes the lack of funding from other sources. So it allows us to continue to support operations. Now, so right here really is where you can kind of see the impact of some of the enrollment decline and with the teacher line item. So there is a pretty big drop there. We have an increase here for principals, vice principals. Now that is predominantly because the associate position was actually reported under other professionals and the directors. So all directors are reported under principals, vice principals. Why? I don't know, but that's what we've been asked to do by the Ministry of Education. You can see a little bit of an increase in the educational assistants. Now, some of that reason was in the past year, this year, and I know this kind of came up with some of our budget feedback, which was as some positions that weren't filled within the inclusive ed, we basically reutilized that funding to other positions. There was a last year, like racism type funds and some other supports at Carry High that we've had to retain because we feel that we will hit our staffing targets and that personnel are available. Support staff, there's a little bit of a decline there. That's predominantly from, again, some of the enrollment declines that are impacting some of our formula positions. Other professionals is up just a little bit. That was I had that as a health and safety position, but I'm not entirely sure that that's what that was, it was a after a prelim budget ad, that we, based on, an incident that we had where it was identified that we needed additional supports in health and safety for compliance purposes. The reduction in substitutes. Now, that one actually was the strategic priority reduction that we made as part of that budget proposal, actually came out of the TTOC. So you can see that it was a school board office item, but it predominantly goes and supports release time for teachers so that we can bring people together to further pursue the board's strategic priorities. Now the big cost increase, which unfortunately continues, as I got a benefit renewal last week and a half ago, that is exactly the same as it was the year before, which is a huge increase. So employee benefits continue to go up. We've got about $500,000 from last year's prelim to this year's prelim. I'm not sure if what we have budget there is even quite enough still. So, well, we will watch that. And again, that's the only enhancement we're making year to year, is just being able to pay our benefits.
So just as a question of that, when PSEC approves the percentages, doesn't benefits wrap in with like the cost of living allowances? Like, isn't that all covered as part of the funding?
So when BCPC and PSEC settle and they make a benefit improvement, let's say they take massages from 5 to 10 per year, they will fund that increase. What they don't fund is when that massage therapist change their rates from $100 an hour to $120 an hour. What they don't change is for the people that weren't going to use it because it was only 5, and now, so rather than 10% of your overall employee group using it, now that it's 10, you've got 20% of your employee group using it. It doesn't cover that. And so, and the biggest increase, as I was discussing with the EBT benefits person last week, drug costs. Some of the pharmaceuticals that are covered, you might be surprised at what's actually covered. They're very expensive and they're being very well used.
So we're seeing less use of employee well-being kind of benefits and just more increased costs related to like medical.
There's a pharmaceutical ad that I think will continue with 20% increases for a number. So
that might be a pump for advocacy for funding.
yeah, and it's also not something that the board agreed to.
Right.
Right. So it gets added, that, and as our board didn't agree with that specific change, so unfortunately.
Thank you.
No. The next item that kind of has a bit of a drop, the services. So that really is a placeholder for us for both our international. When they're preparing their budgets, if they have positions identified, we move those positions out. But if they're not quite ready when because we bring the preliminary budget quite early, if they're not sure where it goes, we actually will reserve a budget in the services. So this year, they were allocated out to the positions, obviously that happened in the past. Prody to professional development travel had a pretty good increase from year to year. But that is reflective of the teacher Prody is the biggest part of that for our Prody classes. And so, yeah, overall on the services and supplies, we're seeing a decrease of about 150 on the salaries. Where we saw a decline of about 400, but we're seeing a $500,000 increase on the benefits. So that is the operating. I'm not going to go through the other schedules. If you do have questions, please feel free to ask. Now, I hope that the board will support approval in all 3 readings tonight. But if not, we can come back at the next board meeting and bring it forward to the board at that time for final reading.
So just a final, another process question. If we get an extraordinary enrollment over the summer and our projections are way out, like we blast our projections out of the water. What does that look like in the accounting cycle?
So, so that's great news. That's been, from when I became ST until the last year, I think there was 1 year with a deficit. So I thought it was good luck because we were able to add continuously through that 10-year cycle. It's always ideal. So the first thing that we would have to do is we have to staff it. We have to staff and support. So we're gonna have formula-based supports that go with those students, teachers, EAs, admin assistants that potentially change, or will increase. Then what we'll do is we'll look at our costs to see our benefits covered. If benefits gone up another 100 grand, we'll have to cover that first. And then it's after then that you can start looking at other type of items. Now, normally, let's say we ended up with another $200,000 above all those costs. Normally, we wouldn't come back to the board looking to spend that right at that time. We would wait until the end of the year. And then we would look to, as part of the budget feedback process, take in the feedback of what else is needed so that everybody has equal opportunity. And then look to add at that point. So it's been very, very rare. We have done it, made a mid-year ad, but it's very rare. And we are reluctant to do so just because we don't have that feedback to consider where the best place is to go.
Trustee Hagan.
I get a little frustrated because we develop a strategic plan that we talk about, child focused and child centered. And yet all we talk about is money and not out of any fault, it's the contracts. There's probably less than 6% that we actually have any kind of, or 7% that we have any kind of flexibility with in our budget.
Well, here I would say it's, yeah.
0%.
It is 0% because we're taking away. If we had discretion, we wouldn't be taking away, right?
So I guess the frustration that I have is that when good things are happening in the classroom, it's not a result of strategic planning, it's whatever the best part of the contract reads. If it's a strong part of the contract, then we don't cut there. So what it reaches down to is we're cutting parts of the programs based on the strength of the contract, which is a really sad case instead of actually physically saying what's best for kids. Balancing the budget is best for kids in one way, but strategically speaking, I'd rather just have the good things that are occurring in the classroom continue occurring. That's where I'm looking at things.
Trustee Hagan. Any other questions or comments before we move? Oh, Trustee McMahon.
I would just like to express my gratitude to the senior management team and particularly Secretary Treasurer Patrick for the headache that this must have caused. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Trustee McMahon. Trustee Gillis.
Yeah, just along similar lines. This is very, it's not easy because I think we have a district, I think, with a lot of strong relationships within, and I just want people to know that it is not easy to recognize that we're working with less funding than we would like to have. And as a result, it does impact. And I believe from all of our deliberations and from information we've been given that at least at this point, we are not having people who will lose jobs. I guess that's the important thing for me.
So every position identified will get displaced, but they will find employment and be able to stay with the school districts in here. Other than the position for attrition.
Yes, all right. Well, thank you. And again, I know that your work has been time intensive, and I'm sure it's been emotion laden at times. And we as a board do appreciate the thought and the integrity that you bring to the process.
But yeah, my position as a secretary treasurer is a facilitator to put this together. I rely on the feedback from the people that share. I rely on the senior management team with the educational expertise to put this forward for the board to consider. So, yeah, so I don't take it personally.
Good.
I'm not that
Good.
smart, so.
Trustee Hagan?
At the bottom end, though, people will be losing their positions. We are cutting back by 6 or 7 positions as is proposed in the budget as it stands. That eventually, as you head down the bottom of the list, there's going to be 5 positions gone. How that looks, I don't know. You can't get $600,000 without some cuts happening.
So we have 5 less positions, but we also have been able to find those people positions. I think
Those people, I'm talking about at the bottom now. When those people take a position, there's gonna be somebody at the bottom who's gonna be
Okay.
laid off.
Is there any further discussion before we go to the motion for 3 readings? So just to remind everyone, we will be requesting, I'll be putting forward a motion to read all 3 readings of the annual bylaw budget at this meeting. So we'll start there and then we'll see where we go. So the motion reads that the board hold all required readings of the annual budget bylaw in the amount of $92,234,938 for the fiscal year 2025-2026 at this meeting. So moved by Trustee Hagan, seconded by Trustee Gillis. All those in favor? So we do not have a unanimous decision. So what that prompts is it prompts us into, what that means is it means that we will not be able to pass the budget at this meeting, which is fine. What we're going to do is we're going to move through first and second reading, and then the budget motion will come back to the next meeting on June 17th. It also opens up the floor for more feedback on the budget. So if there is feedback from the audience or anyone in the digital world, the feedback can be presented through the Secretary Treasurer's office. We will be required to pass a budget by June 30th for submission to the ministry. So if it delays, then we'll call a special meeting of the board until we get the budget passed. We're not required to have a unanimous consensus on the budget. We just need to have the majority. So I'm going to move on to first and second reading, and then we'll pause the budget conversation there. So the motion reads that the annual budget bylaw in the amount of $92,234,938 for the fiscal year 2025-26 pursuant to section 113 of the School Act be and is hereby read for the first time. May I have a mover, please? So moved by Trustee Harper, seconded by Trustee Hagan. All those in favor? The second reading is that the annual budget bylaw in the amount of $92,234,938 for the fiscal year 2025-26 pursuant to section 113 of the School Act be and is hereby read for the second time. May I have a mover? Trustee Gladish, Trustee Hagan, all those in favor? Excellent. So we do not have a unanimous vote for all 3 readings. And we will pause the third reading until the June 17th board meeting. Thank you. Back to my agenda. Get that lost. All right, on to item D, advocacy. Trustee McMahon.
Yeah, I think, it's easy enough to get fired up and, talk about advocacy, and then it sort of drifts away with, distractions that can come up. So I wanted to keep this on our agenda. And I'm wondering if around the table, we have thoughts about how we might move forward in, creating an action plan around this idea of advocacy, at least first steps. We're coming to the end of our school year, so it would be nice to think that we're ready to go in September with something substantive. I'm gonna segue into my report from the District Advisory Committee meeting that I attended on May 20th. And I think parents have, the budget was the primary conversation around that table as well. And so I think parents are aware of the fact that this is the beginning of a bit of a dark age in terms of funding and education, and they are very keen to come on board to collaborate in some kind of action that we might take, and certainly to have the kind of relationship with us that they can better understand what action might be taken and what the real issues are around our funding. So I open it up to the table for any kind of ideas.
Trustee Harper?
Say, rather than reinventing the wheel, I would propose that it be sensible to reach out to both QP and CRDGA many, many years ago. Too many to recount, 25 years ago or whatever it was. There was a very successful BCTF and many school boards dove on board with it. Funding advocacy campaign that took place, and I can't off the top of my head recite all the various bits and pieces of the plans and the spokes of the wheel, but it was well thought out, and it did involve advocacy, but it involved advocacy with some pretty unique twists and turns, and probably with some additions of the era of social media and what have you. Who knows what could happen with it? So rather than we're not starting with tabula rasa here. There have been successful campaigns in the past. Let's look at what worked in the past.
And there are some, getting leaks right now as we speak.
Huge. I was reading the Times Columnist, and there's even Souk is experiencing problems, and they're an increasing enrollment.
Trustee Gladys, your thoughts?
Well, I think that I agree with trustee next to me, but I also think that we need to have a forum of trustees from all over the island. We're having this big VISTA conference in October, and maybe we need, I don't know if we'll have it for September, but I think we need to really have a strong united front to be able to say, this is how these actions that we have to take are impacting our students. And so I think we have to work in that direction. And I agree that parents, they get on board too, that's a strong voice that we have to lean on as well. Yeah.
Perhaps we could take some steps in terms of developing the kind of working relationships with our local teachers and QC in order to, lay the foundation for how we might work together moving forward. How do we do that? Do you, as the chair, approach them about that, or do we form some kind of a committee, or?
Well, do you have a suggestion, Trustee Harper?
I can throw a motion on the floor that the board directs the superintendent to make it so.
Right.
Whatever the wording of that would be.
Well, okay, so a couple, if I may.
Yes.
A couple of things. As you know, we are hosting VISTA. Advocacy has been a primary drive at regional levels and provincial levels, because let's face it, regardless of where you are in the system, it's great that salary increases and things are being funded through contracts, but operational core foundational funding has not increased. And as inflationary costs rise, as we see the results of tariffs, as we see things get more expensive, all school districts, regardless of their growth or decline, are feeling pressures. So VISTA has brought forward an advocacy committee, which will be discussed, and maybe we invite our community partners, our employer groups, to be part of that conversation so that we can start to plan alongside one another. Because I would hate to see us all key into advocacy and then run off in different directions instead of one united voice that government might be more likely to hear. I'm willing to take your motion. We can strike the committee I don't think it's a superintendent responsibility, though. This would be,
I'm not saying that he's going to assign staff to it, but he can at least put his mind to it. And then maybe come back with something to the next meeting. Cause I mean, it's good I think it's always good to have someone, a sober second thought, third eye, looking at something. We have a certain point of view as trustees, but he's running things for us. We expect him to help us out here. And I think he's been in the system long enough. You were around in the days of that great funding success campaign. You remember that? So I put my faith in him.
let's
Just till the next meeting.
let's shake up a motion then.
Okay, so that the superintendent bring forward options and just options for advocacy to the next board meeting. Is that enough?
So the motion reads that, the Board of Trustees tasks Superintendent Manning to bring forward a framework for advocacy to the next board.
There you go.
Does that work?
That works for me.
Does that sound
I
motion
want
yeah?
to leave it open enough.
Do we have a seconder on that motion? Trustee Burns, is there any discussion before we go to a vote?
I think
Trustee Gladys?
at last meeting, we talked about our, being in contact with our elected MLA, to have a discussion about this very thing. So I think it's one thing to have our superintendent give us a framework, but it's another thing to have elected representatives meet and discuss something that is very important to our district, to children, to staff. So, and maybe she can get behind this as well in her role. And I don't know if that needs a motion, but I think it's worthwhile apprising her of this situation, because she has said she doesn't know much about education. I think it was reported to us that this isn't her area of expertise.
Yes, and I don't disagree, but
Okay.
before we're reaching out, before I'm comfortable reaching out, I would like a framework and a consensus amongst our employment partners that, this is our message, this is what we're asking for. Because she did very clearly state, this isn't her field, she's more health related. And in order to be an effective advocate, in opposition, she really needs concrete information provided to her, like gift wrap, basically, that she can take forward. I would be more comfortable with a framework designed by the superintendent first,
Okay.
and then with actions being such as reaching out to our MLA. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and we can't forget about Cedar Elementary as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's another thing that crosses our discussion here, but something that really needs to be addressed in a very strong
Voice.
way.
We've got lots of work for her.
We've got lots of work. So just so that we don't go too far down any one path, let's return to the motion. We'll call for a vote.
Okay.
And the motion reads that.
That the board directs the superintendent to bring forward options for advocacy to the next board meeting.
Thank you. And may I have a vote, please? All those in favor? So approved unanimously. All right. Thank you, Trustee McMahon, for bringing that forward. That was a great conversation. On to 14A, which is business administration, finance warrant number 10. The finance warrants, this is for the, for April 30th. And how nice that it's here before the end of May, like.
They're on
Department's
that.
really-
Yeah.
So the motion reads that the finance warrant number 10 dated April 30th, 2025 be accepted as presented. Trustee Hagan, seconded by Trustee Gillis. All those in favor? So moved. On to, do you have anything further to add to your committee reports, Trustee McMahon? District Parent Advisory?
It was the last meeting of the school year for the District Parents Advisory Committees. So they were discussing how they might like to spend their money on events or workshops or facilitators who might be able to support some of the concerns that parents have around anxiety in their children and technology. And so there was no decisions made, but they're really trying to figure out how best to support families in terms of giving them opportunities to learn more about those things that concern them.
Thank you, trustee McMahon. And, you know, parents, of course, are feeling the anxiety that their children are feeling.
And vice versa.
Absolutely. On to 15B, which is the core Pro D update. Trustee Gladys.
Okay. I attended the meeting on May 20th, and it's always a very interesting time. There's lots of discussion about the need to make sure that we have in place grants and opportunities for teachers to collaborate and mentor each other and to try to get our newest teachers involved in professional development. So without saying too much about a new initiative, there's something called a grade group Pro D days that is sort of in the midst of being developed. And it's a way of gathering together teachers teaching a grade 3, for example, or grade 4, coming together and sort of learning from each other and just sort of finding ways to develop professionally from each other, with each other. And so that's all I can really say about it, because it's in the making and the messaging would be going out soon, and we'll see what happens. And it sounds really exciting, and it's something that has been done in other places quite well. So let you know what happens.
Thank you, trustee Gladys. So that brings us to the end of our scheduled agenda. Is there any other business from the table? Seeing none, are there any questions from anyone present on agenda items for this meeting? Yes. Hi, Andrea. Trustee keep your representative. Sorry.
So, as part of the budget initially that came out, there was an indication that there would be a reduction of intensive behavior positions. And Kevin had said that it really didn't impact the budget, but I'm going to say that yes, it did. In that there was no reduction of jobs, but there's reduction of the wages of those jobs for those positions, as well as where EAs work directly with specific students this past year. There's now going to be a different way of assigning EAs to intensive behavior, which I think is very short-sighted. It doesn't acknowledge the relationships that have already been built with complex students. And so I'm just letting you know that there has been an impact to staff, and there is going to be an impact to students. My other concern with that is that potentially we're going to have to put forward a bunch of grievances come the new year in order to properly service those students that potentially have not been yet designated as intensive behavior. And there could still be a significant increase in the need for those specific positions. So
just to begin, I want to acknowledge that the trustees did receive your letter.
Yep.
But we received it late today. Your letter was discussed. We're hoping that some of these concerns that EAs are having around positions and shuffling will be addressed at the June 2nd hiring day, which is next week. But I'm going to leave the more detailed kind of process to people that Superintendent Manning.
Well, it sounded to me like I didn't hear a question, Andrea. It sounded like you were making a statement, and statement obviously heard by the board. I think the whole tenure and tone of this meeting tonight emphasized advocacy on behalf of teachers, QP representatives, school districts as a whole, because we find ourselves in this situation where just cost of living alone and increases in expenses are putting us into the red year after year. And unless we get that magical enrollment number that Kat hopes for, we're going to be in this position for several years. And we try really, really hard to look at avenues and venues and ways that don't affect people in a dramatic way. You know, Trustee Hagan said at the bottom line, somebody is affected or we wouldn't be saving money, and that's true. I think what Secretary Treasurer Patrick was trying to say that nobody who is owed a job by our school district is losing a job. It's what we are losing temporary contracts. We are losing some jobs down at the bottom of the scale, and that's a reflection of the underfunding we're position that we're in right now. So, and tonight the board tasked me with coming up with a framework for advocacy for the next board meeting. So we are taking steps to move forward and do the best job that we can.
So on that thought that we are looking at declining enrollment for the foreseeable 4 years, sounds like minimum. The concern is also that we are seeing more and more complex students come into our school system. So even though we're going to be squeezed harder and harder with our funding ability and our budget, and that certainly can be part of the conversation that the advocacy group, which I'm really pleased that we're going to go forward with that. It's very necessary given what we're faced right now, and that you are going to potentially hear some thoughtful ideas on how we do move forward that is going to be the most respectful for students and staff as we can be in restrained budgets. So, and thank you for that. The other question I had was, I wondered why childcare was included in the budget, because my understanding is that it's a user system and that all of these costs are either paid by grants or parents or different groups that support parents in receiving childcare. So can you explain that to me?
We were told exactly where we must put childcare revenue, which is parent payments, fees, grants, and where exactly we must put the expenses for childcare by the Ministry of Education.
But I'm wondering why it was included in the budget. Because it's cost neutral, it's supposed to be cost neutral.
And we need to reflect it to show that we are receiving money and that we do have expenses. So even if it is cost neutral, we have to show equal amount of revenue, equal amount of expenses. It does add to the FTE and the operations of the school district, and it will be a more and more substantial piece. And that's part of the transparency that we owe to the public, that we do have that childcare program, and to show, like, really, especially right now, if at some point it may start to affect K to 12 dollars, it may start taking away from the classroom. And when that occurs, we need to be open and transparent to the public, just in case you may need to make tough decisions to make a change. We've got a lot more people that are part of the system. So it's not just kindergartners to grade 12s. We now will have 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds. We'll have families who rely on us quite significantly. So any change in our programs, they will benefit from as much heads up as they can get and as much advanced warning as they can get.
Are there any questions online?
There are. So 3 questions have come in from Deborah Coombe, who's the president of CRDTA. The first one reads, there has been a recent staff announcement of retiring administrators, and they are being replaced in an overlap model where their successors are going to be hired for several months while the current administrator is still working. This could account for spending in thousands of dollars. Are these costs covered in the operating budget, grant money, or other funding source?
So we have identified 2 special purpose funds that will pay for the full cost of that overlap.
The second question, the increase in the PVP budget is $425,636. This cannot simply be due to the change in where we list the former associate superintendent. What are the other costs being added to the PVP budget line for this year?
So when and where we can, we have relied on the special purpose funds to cover and pay for as much of the salaries as we can. So for instance, we've had principals who've actually been running our Feeding Futures program. Next year, we do not expect that to occur. So we've taken the principal salary from the special purpose fund and we've had to move it back up to the principal line item. And we have probably, I can't remember, I thought I had identified what those were. Was that like 0.6 of a position that was in the special purpose fund that's moved up. So it was a substantial portion of a salary.
If the increase is in the PVP line, why didn't the other professionals budget line decrease to reflect where we listed if there is where that position was moved, if that is where that position was moved from?
So I had mentioned the health and safety exempt admin assistant to support the health and safety position. That was after the prelim and before it was between those two budgets. So it wasn't recorded in the prelim of last year. It came a little bit later.
And one other question came in from Deborah Jones. Is the board aware that there are teachers losing jobs contrary to the information shared tonight because many positions being offered are not reasonable, require multiple schools for assignments, and do not complement positions they already have? So teachers are choosing to reduce FTE and take cuts, not all teachers being displaced or being made whole. So the question being, is the board aware?
We're required by the School Act to balance our budget. And as much as we would like to lessen the impact to our employee groups, all of our employee groups, we're all just people. We all care about our jobs. We care equally about your jobs. But we are required by the School Act to pass a balanced budget. And this isn't about attacking the board or staff. It's about how do we unite around advocacy? How do we really show government that the system isn't working and it's causing impacts to student outcomes and learning, to our employee groups? We need to unite versus divide. We are aware, and we do know that we are required by law to pass a budget.
That's all of the questions that have come in online.
Thank you. That was a hard board meeting. Seeing no further, that is a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Trustee Hagan. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.